Abiotic factors in the wetlands biome include hydric soils. Hydric soils are often heavily saturated with water, which in turn develops anaerobic conditions. It has a reduced iron content that gives the soil a gray color. Hydrophytes are water-loving vegetation that is adapted to grow in the low oxygen conditions of hydric soil. They require highly saturated soil to survive. Scientists often divide wetlands into four groups. First are marshes, which are characterized by soft-stemmed vegetation like grasses that have adapted to saturated soils. Second is swamps, which are a forested wetland characterized by the presence of trees. Bogs are low in nutrients and contain highly acidic water. They accumulate peat, which is a deposit of dead plant material. Fens receive their water supply from runoff or groundwater as opposed to rainfall and accumulate peat, both of which are characteristics shared by bogs. Fens, however, are neutral or alkaline, not acidic. This is a climatogram of the Florida Everglades wetlands, where the orange bar graph indicates monthly precipitation and the blue line graph shows temperature. Precipitation increases with temperature on average, so the highest rainfall comes in the summer, where November to April receive less than 3 inches each month. This map comes from a 2014 Chinese study that determined where wetlands were located globally. They make up a fair part of northeastern North America and are generally seen mostly between 30 and 75 degrees north. They are most abundant in regions where a high supply of water is supported by the climate, like in tropical regions, but can still be found in some more temperate locations. Wetlands protect surrounding areas from flood damage by soaking up rain runoff and filtering sediments, pollutants, and nutrients, as well as returning rainwater to the ground during dry periods through its spongy soil. Wetlands also support very high biodiversity, which allows many plants and animals to coexist and benefit their habitat. Economically, fish and shellfish from wetlands are very valuable for fishing communities, as well as blueberries, cranberries, and rice, which also grow there. In Louisiana, for example, coastal marshes provide fish and shellfish that are caught and sold each year as a major part of the state's economy. As of March 2020, 25% of wetlands plants and animals are considered at risk of extinction. One of these species is the eastern indigo snake, which can be found in the freshwater marshes of the Everglades and is federally listed as a threatened species. It typically attempts to live in the burrows of gopher tortoises to nest and avoid colder temperatures. The loss of much of the gopher tortoise's habitat is a primary reason for what has caused the indigo snake to become threatened. The great blue heron can also be found in wetlands over most of North and Central America. It uses its long legs and neck to forage in the water and can catch fish in the wetlands environment. Wetlands have been referred to as biological supersystems because they support a very high level of species richness. The shallow water availability and high primary productivity allow for many species of birds, fish, amphibians, shellfish, and insects to thrive. The dwarf lake iris is a threatened species that only grows around the Great Lakes and is adapted to grow in limestone-rich gravel or bedrock, which makes the wetlands biome an ideal area to grow in. Shoreline development has greatly reduced the dwarf lake iris's lakeshore habitat. It has been on the U.S. list of endangered and threatened wildlife and plants since 1988. The purple loosestrife is another plant that can be found in wetland environments. It was unintentionally introduced to the Great Lakes region in the mid to late 1800s and is considered a non-native invasive species outside of Europe and Asia. It was originally planted as a decorative plant, but can grow in shallow water or along the shoreline near water. Swamps and marshes in the wetlands classification have the highest overall net primary productivity out of all ecosystems. The high water content in soil allows for high rates of photosynthesis, which fuels plant growth and reproduction. Wetlands have been threatened by many human activities for hundreds of years. Approximately 35% of the world's wetlands were lost between 1970 and 2015, and the rate at which this is happening has been increasing each year since 2000. Specifically in America, since the late 1700s, over half of the nation's wetlands have been destroyed by development and farming, and we continue to lose close to 60,000 acres each year. Additionally, over 1/3 of the United States' threatened and endangered species are native to the wetlands. In Indiana, 87% of wetlands were lost between the 1780s and 1980s. One primary threat to the wetland biome is pollutants, which include fertilizer, human sewage, pesticides, road salts, or animal waste. These can come from urban and agricultural development and leaking from landfills. They soak into wetland soil and are often absorbed by plants growing in the area, which kill the flora and fauna that keep the wetland productivity successful. Dumping of industrial pollutants is a common source of pollution, so regulations on company waste management have attempted to reduce harm done to wetlands. The introduction of invasive species also leads to competition for natural resources, ultimately disrupting the food cycle after native species begin dying off. Because of this, there have been removal efforts to relocate invasive species away from wetlands areas. These are sometimes volunteer and allow people who are concerned about environmental issues to take part in restoring an ecosystem.